Dinner was extremely nice as Mio had to even make seconds and thirds mainly due to Een. With her gluttony skill, she had almost no limit to the amount of food she could eat after all. Een, don't trouble your grandma so much, Shiro reminded as she raised her eyebrow at Een. Haha, don't worry about it, darling. It reminds me of you when you were younger. You were quite the glutton back then, you know. Mio chuckled while bringing new dishes to the table. Yeah, but I didn't eat an entire pantry, you know. Shiro pouted. You didn't, but you weren't far off. Little Een, let me tell you about how much your mom liked her food. During one of the training sessions, she only gave your granddad a small piece of the sweets while scoffing the rest down herself just to say that there were no more to give him. Mio chuckled. Being reminded of this memory, Shiro thought back to whether or not Nintian had succeeded in achieving Tier 6 yet. Shaking her head, she focused back on the dinner table. Helping her mom clean up, Shiro brought the empty dishes to the kitchen and helped her clean up. So how long are you going to be staying here? Your dad wants to invite a few of his friends over to train your party members, so it would be good to know a time frame. Mio asked with a smile. I'm not sure. I want to stick around for a bit so that I can learn some sword techniques from Dad. I'm also planning to go to Mount Olympus with the party once we've stayed here for a bit. Shiro replied. I see. Do you think 2 weeks would be a good time frame for you? I know that the new age is coming, so it'll be selfish of us to keep you here for longer when you have places to be. Plus, the stronger you are, the less we have to worry since you'll be safe. Mio chuckled. 2 weeks seem very short, doesn't it? Before you know it, time has already passed, and we'll need to go. Shiro sighed. It's fine though. You can always return anytime you want. The demons seem to have backed off a little, so we have some free time, but the government is now wondering what they're up to. After all, the demons have been quite aggressive before, but seeing their sudden change in attitude is concerning. I might have an idea. From what we know, it seems like each of the candidates to become the demon queen or king are preparing for the new age, so do you think that might be the cause? Rather than expand their territory, I think the demons are more focused on cultivating their strength, since failing to become the demon queen or king has some serious consequences. Shiro suggested. Oh, is this similar to the queen role that you told us about earlier? Mio asked. Yeah, it's the lifeline of the demon race. But having a king is much worse, as all the females in the demon race will have the subconscious thought of bedding the demon king. Shiro sighed. That sounds rather unpleasant. We might be at war with the demons, but even I will feel sorry for them if a demon king is born. Imagine a married couple being split apart because of the demon king. Mio frowned. Exactly. Don't worry though, the war with demons might end in the future depending on what happens. Shiro smiled. How come? Because a friend of ours, Maddie, is one of the candidates, and we're going to try our best to put her on the throne. When that happens, we'll be able to reduce the amount of conflicts between humans and demons. Shiro smiled. ROES, it's not going to be easy, you know. Of course. But with the threat of other queens and rulers in the new age, they have no choice but to team up when two queens are friends. It's the best way to survive. Shiro replied. I just hope that it'll go well. The queens seem like they're on a whole new level, so you need to be careful with the fights that you pick from now on. Mio reminded with a worried expression. Don't worry, Mom. I'll be careful. Shiro waved her hand with a grin. Oh, really? Because from what I heard from little Een, you seem to have almost died a few times again, especially after fighting Tier 5s and SIXS as a Tier 4. Mio said with a twitching smile. Asterisk cough? Looking towards the dining hall, Shiro saw Een jump into the rift as she could only grit her teeth. Damn it, just you wait. Turning back to her mom, Shiro forced a smile. They were unavoidable circumstances. Oh really? Mio raised her eyebrow. Yes. The Tier 6 came out of nowhere when me and Lil Tian were exploring one of the ruins. If it wasn't for Lil Tian, I would have died. Then what about the two Tier 5s? From what I've heard, the first one you organized a raid, while the second one you faced when doing something with your sword. They were a godslayer too. Mio reminded. Are they still unavoidable circumstances? Looking to the side, Shiro scratched her cheeks. Asterisk sigh, just be careful. You're no longer a kid, so we can't babysit you like when you were younger. Having a parent bury their children is a painful experience, you know. My mom had to do it with my sister because she caught an incurable disease. Mio sighed while hugging Shiro. Mom, you never told me about your family before. Can you tell me about Grandma and Grandpa? Shiro asked curiously. Amen, perhaps another time. Their identity is a little special. Mio had an awkward smile. What? Kind of special. Next time, darling. Mio shook her head and poked Shiro's nose, which caused her to pout a little before nodding her head. Fine. Once she was finished with cleaning up the dishes, Shiro notified the party that they were going to stay for 3 weeks instead of 2, so that they could get some training before going to Mount Olympus for the god trials. 3 weeks, huh? That should be enough time. I'll give my friends a call so that they can come over to train the lot of you. They owe me a favor after all. Koji grinned. In that case, then can you train me for the 3 weeks then, Dad? Shiro asked as Koji nodded, his head eagerly. Ha ha, your dad is more excited about that than you are, darling. Mio chuckled as she knew that Koji was more than happy to train Shiro. He was a bit of a musclehead after all. Oh right, since you are staying for 3 weeks, we'll need to prepare some rooms for your friends. Koji reminded as Shiro nodded her head. There are some spare rooms next to Shiro's old room, so why don't you lot stay near her for the 3 weeks? Mio suggested with a smile. We even gave it a makeover too since it was so gloomy, even though she liked the cute things. She sighed as Shiro paused what she was doing. What do you mean it was gloomy even though I liked the cute things? What kind of cute things are we talking about? Shiro asked with some traces of panic in her voice. Oh, nothing much. You were hiding nibbles in your wardrobe, even though it was your favorite, so I moved it into a more open space with others that I bought from the shop. Mio chuckled as the party was instantly interested by who Nibbles were. Hearing the nostalgic name, Shiro smiled before realizing how bad this was. After all, it was embarrassing for her if the party knew. Standing up, she was about to run to her room to clear things up when a barrier covered the room, which prevented the use of movement-type skills to get out of the area. Looking towards Aram with a forced smile, Shiro narrowed her eyes. Aram, what are you planning? Nothing much. Just curious about who PFT Nibbles is, Aram said as she let a laugh slip. Oh, Nibbles is just the 8-foot-tall plush that Shiro kept since she was a child. Mio smiled, taking enjoyment in teasing her daughter. Having her secret exposed, Shiro could only sit down with a blush. She had to admit, she did enjoy the plush since it was very comfy. Due to its size, she could just dive into its body and fall asleep. However, the fact that a grown woman like her, one that had experienced 3 lifetimes, kept an 8-foot-tall rabbit plush in her room was very embarrassing. But what concerned her more was the makeover that her mom had mentioned. Mom, what else did you do to my room? Shiro asked with a forced smile. Well, I painted the walls a light pink and gave Nibbles some friends. They were doing quite a nice deal on giant plush animals, you know. Mio chuckled. Hearing this, Shiro spaced out for a moment. Oh my, you killed Mum with embarrassment. Either that or joy since she likes plushies. Een said as prepared to jump into the rift at any moment for safety. Asterisk sigh. Letting out a long sigh, Shiro gave up. Arriving at Shiro's old room, the party could see the mountain of plushies piled up by the side, as a giant 8-foot rabbit was clearly bigger than the rest. Taking off their shoes and setting them by the side, the party walked in. Sighing softly, Shiro shrugged and dived into the pile head first before adjusting herself in the pile. Behold, the plush queen, queen of all plushies. Long may she reign, Een said with a laugh. Hush it, why don't you try it too? It's quite nice. Shiro pouted while throwing a plush towards Een. Catching it, Een was surprised by how soft it was. Oh, my. I can see why you would want an 8-foot plush now, Mom. I wonder if they have an 8-foot chicken drumstick plush. Een mused while also diving into the pile. You'll probably eat it in your sleep. Shiro rolled her eyes. I'll excuse myself now. I'll go prepare the other rooms for your friends, Mio said with a smile. I'll help, Mom, Shiro said as she tried to stand up again. No, it's fine. You enjoy time with your friends. Mio shook her head and left the room. You lot want to hop into the plush pile? Shiro asked as the party looked towards one another before shrugging. Sure, Lyrica chuckled. With how big the pile of plushies were, it was able to fit everyone in. So this is your room, huh? Lyrica asked as she was quite surprised by how big the room was. While she wasn't sure of the exact measurements, she guessed that she could probably fit a few large mounts into this room. Near the back, there was a king-sized bed with bed curtains that seemed to be made from the finest silk. Yeah, from my memories, I've stayed in this room since I was a child. I think I can probably find some old pictures of mine. Shiro mused while pointing towards her desk that was opposite her bed. The desk was quite large and had an assortment of drawers. In addition to this, there were bookshelves above the desk that had a few decorative items that gave the room some personality. To the right of the desk was a bookshelf that had quite a few copies of martial art manuals. Standing up, she walked up to her desk and opened one of the many drawers. Found it, she smiled. Presenting a book of sorts to the party, she opened it to reveal a photo album of her childhood. Holy sh*t, I really do look like Mom when she was younger. Ian widened her eyes when she saw one of the pictures of Shiro eating a snack with a grin on her face. No sh*t. I'd be more concerned if you didn't look like me. Shiro rolled her eyes. Going through some of the photos, the party had some fun as Shiro talked about her childhood days. To their surprise, Shiro was just as gluttonous as Ian when she was younger. After talking for a while, Mio finished preparing their rooms. Since it was still early in the day, they decided to relax a little longer before having some dinner. Once again, Ian was in love with Mio's cooking. This time, Ian even wanted to watch Mio cook so that she could make it for herself. After all, what's the point of paying for a bunch of food at restaurants when you can make better food yourself? Plus, unlike restaurants, Ian didn't need to care about how much she ate when she was the one who's cooking. On the dinner table, Koji informed the party of the arrival of his friends tomorrow, as they will train them for the time that they're here. Let's see. I've invited 4 people to come here tomorrow, and they will teach you what you need most at this time. For Lysandra and Lyrica, you two will be studying under a person named Lynn. She's a talented swordswoman, and she will be able to teach you a trick or two. For Ian, Sylvia, and Aram, you 3 will be studying under a guy named Stanley. He will teach you how mages and healers should survive on the front lines, and how you should defend yourself should you enter melee range with an enemy. Chinyu, you'll have your very own teacher since you're the only assassin in this party. His name is Finn and his training is a little dangerous. But he won't kill you, so it's fine. Koji laughed. So basically Shiro's training, understood. Chinyu nodded. Oi. Anyways, the last teacher that I invited is for Madison and Helion, since you are both heavy weapon users. Her name is Chelsea, and despite her small stature, she is a monster of a woman. She can probably snap you in half like a twig. Just make sure you don't talk down to her like she's a kid or mention her stature. Koji smiled. It shouldn't be too hard then. I've met my fair share of small stature people. Helion laughed as he remembered what Shiro looked like before along with his childhood crush. That's good then. She gets quite violent when looked down upon. Koji smiled. Hearing the names of the teachers, Shiro couldn't help but tilt her head before searching her memories for their identities. Oh my. Chinyu, you have my condolences. Shiro shook her head as Chinyu paled. Wait, what do you mean? He asked with worry. I just remembered who Finn was. Shiro replied while glancing away from him. When Koji meant that Finn wouldn't kill him, he wasn't wrong. However, the state that he'll be in after the training wasn't far from death. Hell, even her training was better in some regards since they weren't that close to death. Hearing this, Chinyu seemed to have his soul ripped out as he started to dread for the arrival of tomorrow. So since everyone else is getting teachers, I'm guessing that I'll be studying with you then, Dad. Shiro said while looking towards Koji. Half. Me and your mom will be teaching you since there are areas where we can both give you tips. Plus, your skill set has parts of what me and your mom are good at, so we might as well help you improve in those areas while we're here. Who knows when's the next time you'll be able to come back? Koji chuckled. Oh, Mom's also teaching me. Shiro raised her eyebrow in surprise as Mio nodded her head. Of course. I also want to spend time with my baby girl after all. Mio smiled. PFT, baby girl. Ian giggled at how Mio addressed Shiro. Poochie. Feeling Shiro's annoyance, Ian quickly dived into the rift without hesitation. Don't be so violent. Now, Mio sighed with a soft smile. Fine. Shiro nodded as Ian popped her head back out. Thank you, Grandma. She smiled. Don't worry about it, darling. Just don't annoy your mom too much. Mio waved her hand. Talking for a little longer, they rested up for the night. Sleeping in her own room after such a long time, Shiro felt extremely calm. Looking up at the ceiling, she had a soft smile on her face. It's good to relax like this for a while, isn't it? Nimue chuckled. Amen. I was a bit nervous at the start, but it seems like I was worrying for nothing. I could tell. It's not often you try to delay something so actively. Speaking of delay, I should pay a visit to the spirit capital sooner or later. I don't know where it is, but Estrella should know the way. I know the general direction. The spirit capital shifts locations once in a while due to the dangers that surround us, but I know the most viable places. Estrella replied, "Thank you. We still have the map to the garden shard to think about too. We'll need it in order for you to make an anchor." Nimue reminded, "True. I'm thinking of looking for it after the god trials in Mount Olympus. Once we pass those, we should get a decent boost in strength, and it would be a good chance to search for the shard. After all, if I build it hastily without the strength to back it up, everything could be ruined. Where are you even going to place the anchor?" "I'm not sure, but I'm thinking of using this place as the base. I'll spend a while modifying this city so that I can convert it into a flying city/fortress when I need to. That way, the citizens will be safe if they choose to stay in my domain. The second option is the spirit capital. After all, I am the queen, so I need to protect the race. We will see in the future. For now, though, let's just focus on getting stronger so that we can accomplish everything." Shiro smiled as she closed her eyes and slept peacefully. Waking up early the next morning, Shiro yawned and made her way down to the kitchen in her pajamas. The pajamas weren't anything fancy, as it was just a shirt and some pants. However, the fact that they're light pink caused Shiro's smile to twitch. But the material was quite comfy. Plus, wearing a set of black pajamas wouldn't be good to begin with. Entering the kitchen, she was actually surprised that Mio and Ian were already awake and cooking. "Oh my, isn't this a surprise? Yin's actually awake so early." Shiro raised her eyebrow. "Well, little Ian wanted to learn how to cook a good breakfast, so I was just teaching her." Mio chuckled. Glancing over at Ian, Shiro could see that she was fully focused on her task. Remembering that Ian was quite a good cook in the future, Shiro was rather excited by what she was going to produce. Who knows, it might be something amazing on the first try. "So what's she making?" Shiro asked. "It's something simple. Just some rice congee and a few side dishes with a few eggs. Shouldn't be that hard." Mio replied with a smile, nodding her head. Shiro decided to do a search on the teachers that her dad had invited while she waited for Ian to finish cooking. After all, it had been quite a few years since she had last seen them, so it was a good idea to get up to date with what they've been up to. The first person that her dad had invited was a swordswoman named Lin. Lin was a slender woman who was quite tall. Measuring around 5 feet 11, she had a highly aggressive and reactive fighting style, which allows her to break through her opponent's guard by analyzing how they defend against her barrages. For someone like her, one should attempt to face her head on and reverse the flow of battle, or else it was going to be hard to win against her. An example would be a tiny snowball rolling down a mountain. Once you give her some room to work with, she'll exploit the gaps and take your life before you know it. A teacher like Lin was perfect for Lyrica and Lisa since their fighting style was similar. Their defense was poor, but the attack was outstanding. There was one thing that concerned Shiro, and that was the fact that Lin was known to have a hard time talking to people. She much prefers acting rather than talking, so she was worried about whether or not Lisa and Lyrica could actually learn from her. Since Dad chose her out of everyone he knows, there's probably a good reason for it. Shiro mused to herself before checking the other teachers. The second teacher that her dad had invited was Stanley. There wasn't much known about him, only that he was hailed as one of the greatest mages to have existed. His specialty lies in the fact that he had mastered the use of analytic magic. It was a type of magic that not many use, much less master. The main principles of analytic magic was that it would analyze the opponent's magic and turn it against them. In one way, it was similar to her celestial path, where she cancels out magic by breaking the spell circle. But that wasn't all. Even if Stanley couldn't see the magic circle, his senses when it comes to mana were top-notch. If one wanted to know about magic, he was the go-to person. He was also the teacher that Kuromi studied under for a while when she was a child. If you studied his teachings diligently, he was a very nice teacher and one that would make sure to try his best to help you. On the other hand, if you dismiss his teachings or ignore what he says, he will just give up on teaching you altogether. There had been a few times where Kuromi had seen another kid with her studying under Stanley, but he gave up teaching them, since they didn't focus. Alpha and Beta, the only reason she kept focusing was so that she could teach Lil Tion about magic. That way, he could protect himself even with his weak physique, and Stanley was quite happy about her diligence. Unfortunately, he had something that he needed to deal with, hence why he left for a bit, but now that her dad had re-invited him, Shiro was quite excited to greet her old teacher. The third person that her dad had invited was Finn. There wasn't much else she needed to search as he was as violent as usual. Out of the four teachers, it was the fourth and last one that Shiro was most curious about since she had no memory about her. Searching up about the teacher named Chelsea, Shiro found out that she had appeared near the front lines one day and started to help out. From her description, it seemed like she was living with her parents in one of the demon territories when they were attacked by monsters, and she had to fend for herself. She was stuck in the demon territory for quite a few years where she had to hunt and feed herself when she caught wind of humans being close and decided to check it out. From then on, she helped on the front lines and made quite a name for herself. "Mom," Shiro called out as the information on Chelsea cut off after this point. "What is it, darling?" "So I'm searching up information about the teachers that Dad invited." "But who's Chelsea? There's not much known about her." Shiro asked. "Oh, you're wondering about Chelsea, are you? Well, she's a nice girl that doesn't like to interact with too many people. She's part of our party in the front lines, and she's been quite helpful. Her lineage seems to be quite special, but she keeps it a secret since she doesn't want the government to bother her too much." Mio replied as Shiro nodded. "What do you mean by special?" "Well, it's the weapons that she uses. It's similar to having a spirit guardian, I suppose. It'll be easier for you to understand when you see them yourself." Mio chuckled. After waiting for a while, Ian had finally finished cooking. Setting the food out on the table, she sat opposite Shiro and waited for her evaluation with an excited look on her face. Seeing this, Shiro smiled softly and picked up the bowl of rice kanji. Before she even got a mouthful, she could already smell the strong scent of salt and felt a little worried for the taste. However, since it was her daughter's first attempt at cooking, some sacrifices were needed. Taking a moment to brace herself, she took a mouthful. Surprisingly, the impact of salt never came as Shiro raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Oh my, this tastes quite an blurg." The salt was a delayed taste. Feeling as if she had just drunk a mouthful of salt water, Shiro couldn't hold it back anymore and ran to the kitchen before grabbing herself a bunch of orange juice from the fridge. Chugging it down to rehydrate herself, Shiro looked back at the slightly down Ian. "Maybe you should be careful of how much salt you put in there," Shiro said as Mio tilted her head. It thought it was quite nice though. It's only a little salty, but surely it doesn't warrant such a reaction, no." Mio furrowed her brows, taking a mouthful of the kanji. "See, it's not too bad." "Huh, what do you mean?" The saltiness was like a surprise punch after a moment of calm. "No? Can't you smell how salty it is?" Shiro asked with confusion. "No, why don't you give it another try?" Mio said, presenting a spoonful of rice kanji for Shiro. Flinching slightly, Shiro nodded her head reluctantly and took a bite. However, her reaction was the same. It didn't taste that good. Strange. Mio furrowed her brows since it didn't look like Shiro was acting. After clearing out the salty rice in her mouth, Shiro had a small idea on what had happened. "Mom, I think I know. I practiced a martial art that heightens my senses, so anything that's slightly strong will become super strong for me. An example is probably salt. Everyone else can taste a little while I taste a lot. For yesterday's meal, the seasoning was balanced so it tasted nice, but for Ian, she put a bit too much salt so it dominated the taste." Shiro theorized as Mio had a surprised look on her face before it was replaced by excitement. "This is perfect for little Ian as your senses are the best way to practice cooking." Mio smiled. "Pardon?" Shiro tilted her head. "Little Ian needs practice with her seasoning, so you're perfect for the job. You can tell her which seasoning dominated the mix so that she understands how to balance it out." Mio explained. Understanding that this meant she's going to become a test dummy for Ian, Shiro sighed. However, since Ian made super tasty meals in the future, this means that her efforts had paid off. For good food, her sacrifice was small. And so, Shiro agreed to become the test subject for Yin's cooking. One by one, the rest of the party woke up and decided to have a taste of Yin's cooking. Aside from the fact that it was only a little salty, it was a good first attempt. "Mom, where's Dad?" Shiro asked after noticing that he was absent from the dinner table. "Oh, he's just out welcoming his friends. They did take the teleport shrine here after all." Mio smiled as Shiro nodded. Waiting for a little while, Shiro eventually sensed her dad's mana signature approaching along with four others who were equal, if not a little weaker than his signature. "I'm back," Koji called out with a smile as they For teachers followed behind him. Are these the kids that will be teaching? Lynn asked while examining them one by one. Narrowing her eyes at Lyrica and Lysandra, she understood that they're the ones that she'd be teaching for the next 3 weeks. Yup, their potential is pretty good, you know. I've had a small spar with each of them. Koji smiled, reassuring his friends of their prowess. If you say so. Lynn shrugged. She'd make her own judgment after a few lessons to see if they're worthy of being taught. After all, 3 weeks of their time is no joke, and if it wasn't for Koji, they wouldn't even think about it. You two follow me. We're starting straight away. I'll be taking your training hall 3. Lynn said and gestured for Lysandra and Lyrica to follow her. Raising their eyebrow, they nodded their heads and followed after her. Hasty as usual. Koji chuckled since Lynn was a woman who preferred to act quickly. I don't blame her. Now which one am I teaching? Finn grinned before making eye contact with Chunyu. So it's him. I'll take training hall 2 then. Finn laughed as he flickered beside Chunyu and dragged him away by his collar. Sylvia only gave Chunyu a loving wave and a smile while whispering, I'll revive you if you die. Naturally, that didn't escape Finn's notice. That's good to know. He grinned, which caused Chunyu to pale. So which midget am I teaching? Chelsea asked as Shiro had to quickly stifle her laugh and acted natural. After all, she was the shortest out of everyone here, and yet she was calling them midgets. That'll be the 2 over there. One's a tank, and one uses an axe. Koji said while pointing towards Madison and Helion. Okay, you 2 shorties follow me. I'll take your training hall 1, okay? Chelsea crossed her hand as Helion and Madison followed. Behind her, with Helion's height, he looked like a giant towering over a blade of grass. Sure, take it easy on them. Koji chuckled. Looks like I got 3 students now. Stanley swept his gaze across Ian, Aram, and Sylvia before making eye contact. With Shiro, furrowing his brows for a moment, he opened his mouth. Your hair, it has changed. Your mana quality seemed to have soared beyond the human average. Have you been practicing your mage craft diligently? He asked with a small smile. New, of course. As for my hair and mana, some things happened, so I'm stuck like this now. Shiro replied with a chuckle. Stanley, she's also been studying the blade too, you know? If anything, I'd say she has been focusing on the blade rather than magic, since her experience isn't something that can be obtained offhandedly. Koji informed with a smug smile. Oh, frowning slightly, Stanley glanced towards Shiro with slight traces of disappointment, but sighed. After I train these 2 for a session, I want to have another teaching session with you. I want to see the current state of your magic. He shook his head. Sure. Shiro nodded her head. I'll be taking your biggest training hall, Stanley said, as he walked towards the 3 magic users of Shiro's party. Waving his hand, a tier 5 magic circle opened up beneath them, and he teleported away with his new students. Now that it was just the 3 of them, Shiro looked over at Koji. Did you have to be so petty, Dad? Shiro sighed. What? He's been boasting about magic all these years, and yet he still struggles while fighting me. Koji shrugged. Ignore your dad. You know how their rivalry on which is better had lasted for quite a few years. I think the reason he started to teach you magic was to spite your dad since you wanted to learn. Mio chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. Amen. Anyways, shall we go as well? Shiro smiled. Making their way to training hall 4, Koji prepared a few swords for them to use. So what am I going to be learning first? Shiro asked while grabbing 2 long swords and twirled in her hands. What do you want to learn first? Both me and your mother can teach you something new. Koji replied with a smile. I haven't sparred with Mum yet, so maybe we start with that. Shiro suggested as Mio nodded her head. Sure, we can do that. You can go all out, darling. You don't have to worry about hurting me. Mio chuckled. Nodding her head, Shiro was still going to hold back a little since it was her mother after all. Even if she was stronger, she still didn't want to harm her by accident. Reaching into her inventory, Mio pulled out an abnormally thin sword, which seemed like it was made from a very thin sheet of glass. Seeing this, Shiro summoned 2 copies of Athera into her hands along with the remaining 5 which floated around her. The moment her mother pulled out that sword, her aura seemed to change as cold sweat dripped from Shiro's back. It was a similar feeling to when she stood in front of the Tier 6 Guardian, only she felt like her mother was more dangerous. I heard from your father that you like to use magic, but there were some gaps, so I'd suggest sticking with pure sword techniques for now. Mio suggested as she gestured for Shiro to make the first move. Nodding her head, Shiro narrowed her eyes and activated her divine raiment in order to boost up her speed. Choosing lightning as the base element, she was about to dash forward when Mio waved her hand slightly, and the sword seemed to disappear from her hand. The next thing Shiro knew, she was surrounded by a web of sword cuts that would lash out at her the moment she approached Mio, widening her eyes. She had the 5 copies of Athra protect her while jumping into the rift. Opening several entrances around Mio, Shiro flickered between the openings in order to throw her off. However, it seemed futile as a sword would always appear in front of Shiro whenever she decided to exit, forcing her to stay in the rift for longer periods of time. Damn. Despite being a heavy offense-based fighter, Mum's defenses are crazy, Shiro thought to herself. Jumping out of the rift and forcing some distance between them, Shiro frowned and tried to think of a way to attack her. However, no such opportunity arrived as Shiro wasn't able to exploit such gaps with her current skill level. Shall I attack now? Mio asked with a small smile. Yes. Shiro nodded with a serious expression. Nodding her head, Mio slowly walked towards her. With every step that she took, her speed would increase. By the time she took the 10th step, she had already disappeared from Shiro's sight and flickered behind her. Feeling her instincts screaming at her, Shiro bent her body to the side and tried to counterattack with her spare sword. Asterisk clang. Flicking her wrist, Mio disarmed Shiro and pointed the tip of her sword at Shiro's nose. My win, Mio smiled before putting away her sword and hugged Shiro. Fufufu, how is it, darling? Mio asked while patting Shiro's head. Damn, both you and Dad are crazy strong. Shiro sighed. Well, of course. We've spent our lives practicing with the sword. Though I've noticed something, darling. Why does it seem like you're more used to the dagger or hand crossbow? Well, not exactly the hand crossbow, but something similar, Mio asked. During the fight, she noticed that Shiro's movements with the sword seemed to have been adapted from some other fighting style, which worked with different weapons. Emin, how do you know? Shiro raised her eyebrow in surprise. Well, your last move gave it away. Normally, in that situation, you would want to use your sword to block rather than counterattack since you wouldn't be able to generate enough force to harm the opponent. Second, there's a chance that they can disarm you with them being so close to the handle and guard of your sword. Unless you're using a poison dart hand crossbow and wanted to shoot them from up close, you wouldn't usually use that move, but you used it instinctively. Meaning, you are used to using the hand crossbow or something similar. Mio explained as Shiro nodded her head. Yeah, I'm used to a different weapon. I'm sure you're familiar with the rumors of a gun being able to kill high-level monsters and adventurers, right? Well, I'm the source of those rumors. Shiro replied as nanobots surged around her hand and formed a hand cannon. Oh my! Widening her eyes in surprise, Mio was shocked to find out that Shiro was actually the owner of the guns that had been discussed quite a few times. It was something that the front lines desperately wanted so that even those who were lower level could impact a large-scale battle. After all, one could see how easily it killed high-level adventurers in Muriel when Shiro first showed them to the world. You're the rogue assassin? Mio asked. URG, I don't like that nickname, but yes. I'm the one with these guns. If you look at my proper class, you can see that it's called Divine Sylph Nanomancer. The Nanomancer part of my class is what allows me to conjure up guns that can help me kill monsters. Shiro explained while handing her hand cannon to Mio. What is a Nanomancer? Mio asked while taking a closer look at the gun. Just a mage that primarily uses nanobots to fight. Nanobots can be used to craft a multitude of things as long as you have a detailed blueprint. Essentially, it's a pyromancer's, but with tiny robots. Shiro explained. Goodness, you'll need to be careful then. The government is keeping an eye out for the guns. If you let them know that you're the owner, it'll be troublesome since at this point, everyone in the world wants it. Mio furrowed her brows before handing it back to Shiro. Don't worry, Mum, I know. Shiro smiled. So since you're used to guns, why don't we spar again, but you with your preferred weapon? Mio suggested as Shiro shook her head. No, because my guns are packed with armor penetration and magic penetration. I'm pretty sure it'll destroy this place and harm you if a bullet hits you. Shiro frowned. How about this? If you're worried about Mom, I'll equip my best armor and activate my skills so that I can protect myself. Mio smiled. Plus, if I see your main fighting style, I can give you better tips now. Furrowing her brows, Shiro had a different idea. What if we do it in the digital world? That way we don't harm the area around us, nor do I harm you. She suggested. That could work. We do have a simulator in the house, but I don't think it can reproduce guns like yours, darling. Mio frowned. I can make my own, don't worry. Pressing her palm against the floor, 3 simulators started to construct themselves. Well, isn't that handy? Koji remarked as Shiro smiled. It is handy, but this class is pretty useless without the blueprints, you know. One needs to have an in-depth understanding of what they want to make in order to create it successfully. Shiro chuckled. Amen. I suppose that is the drawback of the class. Koji nodded. After all, despite how powerful it may seem, unless you have the right resources, the class could become useless. Entering the simulators, the family of 3 found themselves in the center of a coliseum that right then, you should have most if not all your skills, Mom. I'll probably limit the usage of my skills since I want to rely on my fundamental techniques rather than skills. Shiro smiled, summoning a hand cannon and a dagger. Okay, we can start whenever you want. Mio smiled. Nodding her head, Shiro took a deep breath as her aura completely changed. Since this was a simulation, it means that she could attack without the worry or harming her mom. Slamming her hand down, nanobots started to spread through the Colosseum like a spider web as Shiro threw her dagger towards Mio. Asterisk Clang parrying the dagger with ease. Mio raised her eyebrow, but smiled when she watched as Shiro's body flicker away. Raising her sword behind her, she flicked her wrist and slashed towards Shiro's dagger since she had seen many assassins do the same. Surprisingly, her sword missed Shiro as she wasn't there. Oh my. Mio thought with mild surprise, but kept her guard up. Feeling danger about her, Mio quickly looked up to see a barrage of bullets. Crouching down slightly, she took a deep breath and slashed towards the bullets with her sword. Dancing through the hail of bullets, Mio managed to dodge most of them. The ones that did come into contact were only able to cause a scratch. Seeing this, Shiro couldn't help but marvel at her mother's eyesight and reactions to be able to dodge such a barrage. However, despite her amazement, she didn't waste any time. Snapping her fingers, gun barrels formed from the web that she had set out previously. Asterisk bang. Firing another barrage, Shiro took this moment to construct a Tier 5 magic circle and had a sniper set up so that it would fire a powerful shot towards Mio. A Nigerian Arobe, however, before her sniper could have a chance to fire, Mio was already in front of Shiro and had slashed the sniper in half. TSK. Clicking her tongue, Shiro flipped her body back and raised her hand cannon towards Mio. Sensing danger, she quickly morphed the hand cannon into a dagger and parried Mio's blade just in time. So you can switch between weapons quickly. Good to know. Mio smiled, surprised by her daughter's mastery over her own class. You have to be able to do this much if you want to survive the *T I've been through. Shiro laughed. Twisting her body, she kicked towards Mio. Blocking the kick, Mio was surprised to see a gun barrel appear on the heel of Shiro's boot, as she quickly backed off and dodged the bullet just in time. Without hesitation, Shiro dashed towards Mio and threw her dagger. Connecting a nanotech wire around the dagger, Shiro swiped her hand and had it wrap around Mio's body before sending lightning through the wire. Snapping her fingers, spikes started to appear on the wires as Shiro conjured up an army of guns which floated around her, commanding them all to fire in tandem towards Mio. Shiro narrowed her eyes and used this chance to construct a large-scale magic circle. If she was given enough time, she might be able to construct a Tier 6 magic circle, but it depended on what she wanted to do. However, hearing the sound of bullets being slashed apart, Shiro knew that this barrage did nothing to her mother. Shaking her head, she gave up on the Tier 5 magic circle since continuing would mean that she exposed herself to danger. Charging towards the center, she halted the barrage and appeared before Mio. Twisting her body, she wrapped her legs around Mio's neck before throwing her body back down towards the ground. While Mio was falling towards the ground, Shiro summoned her hand cannons and fired towards her. Asterisk bang. Crashing against the ground, Mio's body dispersed into mist before reappearing next to Shiro. But despite seeing her mother about to slash towards her from the right-hand side, Shiro felt a slight tingle of danger to her left and decided to trust her instincts. Firing her hand cannon towards her left, she watched as the figure of her mother appeared. She had barely blocked the bullet that would have pierced her throat. Close but not quite. Mio chuckled. Confused, Shiro furrowed her brows as she felt a sword pierce her shoulder. Glancing behind her, the Mio that she had ignored was still there with a smile. Asterisk sigh, it's my loss. Shiro sighed, understanding that if this was a real fight, her mother could have taken off her head with that move. It wasn't a bad attempt, you know. I may or may not have cheated a little since I chose my best skills. Mio chuckled. What do you mean? Shiro tilted her head. Sword skill, absolute. Defense. As long as I can see and act against an attack, I can block it instinctively. This works especially well with barges since it synergizes with my sword domain. The only downside to this was that it drains a lot of stamina, but I have a lot of stamina replenishing skills. Mio smiled as Shiro's smile twitched. What the hell? Isn't that skill a little broken? Shiro asked. Pound and carat percent pound dollar and carat pound. You can't say sh*t about broken skills. Nimue retorted instantly as she wanted to uproot one of the islands and throw it across Shiro's mana realm. Well, the steps I had to go through to get this skill was quite tough, you know. Plus, it doesn't work too well against hidden attacks. If I can't sense it, then my skill wouldn't work. Mio explained. However, your mother does have a second skill which allows her to fend off against hidden attacks from assassins. In a way, it's similar to Future Sight. Despite the intensity of your attack, there were a few close calls since there is still a limit to how your mother can react. But with her second skill, she can peer slightly into the future and path out the best way to move so that she can dodge the attacks. There is a gap between each cast, hence when some of your bullets managed to graze her during the barrages. Koji explained as Mio glared back at her husband, exposing her like this. Hearing Koji's explanation, Shiro had a strange sense of déjà vu as she had done the same with Sylvia when explaining how grace worked. Anyways, ignoring your father, I think I have the perfect training plan for you. Mio grinned. For the first session, both Mio and Koji focused on improving Shiro's handling with the sword, such as what she should or should not do in certain situations. Its strengths and little tricks when it comes to fighting against her opponent's. Point 1 of the tricks is to use the extended hilt of her sword to block if her reactions were accurate, since it opens up opponents for a downward cleave should she perform it correctly. However, the success rate of this was low if one couldn't accurately see where the enemy's sword was striking. But for Shiro, it didn't take too long to learn, and both Mio and Koji were surprised by her learning speed. Practicing the technique for a little longer, the three of them exited the digital world as they had spent hours inside. I'll go look for little Een since it's almost time for dinner. Mio smiled as Shiro nodded. I'll come with you since I need to look for Teach. After all, he wanted another teaching session with me. Shiro said while giving her body a stretch. Staying inside the simulators for long periods of time does make her body a little stiff. Making their way towards the largest training hall in the compound, Shiro could already feel the large amounts of mana being radiated by her previous teacher and knew that Aram, Sylvia, and Een must be having the time of their lives. Remembering that Een had been rather mischievous recently, Shiro had a grin on her face as she turned to Mio. Why don't we wait a little longer? Teach seems to be on the most important step of the lesson, Shiro suggested with a small chuckle. Maybe. I'll go set up some ingredients for when they finish then. Mio tilted her head before nodding. However, just as she said this, a portal opened up and Stanley walked through. No need. I've just finished now. Their control is pretty lacking except for Aram, but overall they're above average. Stanley said before looking at Shiro, who was a little annoyed but shrugged it off. So where are they? Shiro asked as she couldn't sense them in the training hall anymore. I've already sent them back to their rooms. They're pretty tired, so they're resting up now. Setting them aside, come with me. We're going to have our lesson now, Stanley said as a portal opened up in front of them. Good luck, darling. Mio waved her hand with a smile. Amen. Nodding her head, Shiro stepped through the portal. Once the light faded away, she noticed that they were not in the training hall, but rather on top of a snowy mountain. Where are we? Shiro asked. Looking around her, she could see clouds stretching to the horizon as the top of the mountain seemed to be cut off from the rest of the world. This place has no name. I came across this during one of my journeys and noticed the mana density in this place is higher than any place I've seen. The clouds that you see are in fact highly condensed clumps of mana. Stanley replied. Well, damn. That's a lot of mana, isn't it? In terms of location on the map, whereabouts are we? Shiro raised her eyebrow. Far into the uncharted territory. If I had to explain the rough location, then probably something along the lines of the extreme north. Stanley replied. A with a cute B. Anyways, our lesson will begin here. Okay, what are we going to do? Shiro asked while memorizing this scenery, since it was rather impressive. It's a simple test. I want you to break through one of my spells with your own, and I'll measure your achievements according to what I see. I'll think of your training after you do so. Stanley said with a smile. Sure thing, Teach. Shiro nodded, with a grin, and cracked her neck. Seeing that Shiro was ready, Stanley raised his hands as runes started to swirl around him. Absorbing the ambient mana from the clouds that surround them, the runes seemed to glow with purple hue as they formed. The layers which represented the tier of the spell, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. This continued until Tier 5. However, to Shiro's surprise, the runes didn't stop there. Flicking for a slight moment, the runes seemed to conjure up their last ounce of strength, and the layer was formed. Tier 6. That looking at her old teacher with shock, Shiro was surprised that he had achieved Tier 6 magic. Even though it was going to be common in the new age, for someone to achieve it now was still impressive. I came across Tier 6 magic in my journey, and despite my experiences with this, it seems like it's still rather difficult to conjure up quickly. Unlike my other spells, the main goal for the lesson between us is for me to pass on this knowledge to you, Stanley said as his face seemed a little strained. Now try your best to break through this, and I'll begin the lesson. Seeing her teacher's earnest face, Shiro felt a little awkward since she had already achieved Tier 6 and could conjure it up rather quickly as long as it was something to do with her Snowmancer class. She was still struggling on the elemental ones, but since she had experience with Tier 6 already, it shouldn't be too hard for her to achieve the same effect. Teach, Shiro called out hesitantly. Emin, what is it? I may or may not have also come across Tier 6 magic in my journey around the world. I can't form it properly yet, but I had some old records on it, Shiro said as she crafted an old book with some of her knowledge on Tier 6 magic with nanobots. Making sure that they emanate the same feeling of old paper, she handed it over to her teacher. Flipping through the book carefully, Stanley read the details with an amazed expression. After a short moment, he sighed and shook his head. How embarrassing. I wanted to teach you about this, but it seems like you've obtained more information than I have. Can I borrow this for a little while so that I can study it? Stanley asked as Shiro nodded her head. Of course. You can use it, as long as you want. Shiro nodded with a smile. After all, this was her teacher who had taught her when she was young. Don't worry, I won't take it forever. As payment, I'll give you this item, Stanley said as he reached out into his inventory. No need. Think of it as payment for the past instead, Shiro said, but Stanley shook his head. I was planning to give this to your father, but since you are studying the blade, you might as well have it. Here, I'm not a fan of blades, but this should help you out. Stanley smiled, handing her a small crystal dagger of divine insight. Rainbow, this dagger will transport the user to a divine space, allowing them to study the techniques used by gods who wielded the sword. The user is guaranteed to obtain one skill/technique. Looking at the dagger with shock, Shiro couldn't believe that he just handed her a rainbow-grade item. After all, this was the stuff of legends that she hadn't even seen in her past life. Plus, this could guarantee a skill, which meant that Stanley could use it to protect himself better. But it's fine. The value of knowledge on Tier 6 magic far outweighs the value of this dagger in my eyes. Stanley chuckled. Now, strike at my spell so that I may see your prowess. Looking at the dagger once more, Shiro nodded and stored it away in the inventory. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out her bow that she had not used in a long time. Making some distance between them, Shiro narrowed her eyes. Be careful, Teach, Shiro warned, drawing back her bowstring. Activating her encroaching darkness skill, her Sigil of Night's passive skill was activated, doubling her stats as long as it is night. Firing the first arrow into the air, Shiro snapped her finger and opened up a giant portal. Looking up with mild surprise, Stanley could sense a huge amount of mana being gathered towards Shiro's bow as stars shimmered in the sky. Stacking her skills together, Shiro activated her force of elements and morphed it into the shape of an arrow and notched it on her bow. With her skill scholar activated, she could understand her skills and control them to match her needs. This meant that her next arrow was a culmination of her entire stat board. After all, she wanted to show her teacher how much she's improved since they've last met. Feeling the pressure that was being emitted by Shiro's arrow the longer she charged it, Stanley looked at her with disbelief. The fusion of elements in the arrow, the control of mana, the efficiency of her skills along with the densely packed runes that he could see increasing the power of her next attack. You are indeed the best student I've ever had, Stanley muttered with a soft smile and watched as Shiro fired her arrow. Watching the arrow crash against his Tier 6 spell, Stanley was shocked by the power it had contained, but he wasn't too worried. Snapping his fingers, he started to edit his magic circle while it was under barrage. After a very short pause, he smiled. Asterisk ping. Shattering into dust, the partials reformed themselves into a different magic circle and sent the attack high into the sky. Seeing this, Shiro had a look of disbelief on her face. Wait, how? Shiro asked. Her knowledge, editing a magic circle, while it was under attack, was impossible. That was because the moment the integrity of the spell was broken, the attack would pierce it like nothing and strike towards the caster. The fact that her teacher had changed his spell during the activation was pure insanity. I would say that it's simple, but it's really not. There is a risk to this technique, but if you can master it, it'll allow you to adapt your spell to whatever your enemy is trying to do. My initial spell was to block the best shot you could fire, but since it exceeded my calculations, my next best option was to just redirect the spell away from me. If it was within my calculations, I wouldn't need to change it. In a combat situation, if my spell could handle the attack with ease, you can then use this technique to instantly launch a counterattack. But since you're practicing with the sword now, I suppose you can just charge in while they're stunned. Remember, use this as a last resort since it could backfire if you don't accurately judge the power of their attack. So tell me, why does this work? If you can accurately figure out how this is done, I'll give you another reward. Stanley smiled. Furrowing her brows. Shiro closed her eyes and remembered the activation of Stanley's magic circle. Checking through each of the tiers, Shiro couldn't find anything off about it. However, when the 6th tier appeared, she finally noticed a pattern which stretched across all 6 layers. You snuck in a second magic circle in the different tier layers. I don't know what kind of spell it is, but from what I can see right now, it's one that analyses the power of the attack, right? Shiro asked as Stanley smiled and nodded his head. Yes, you are correct. I did indeed sneak a second magic circle into the tier layers so that it may assist me with calculating how powerful an attack is. After all, one may try to trick you by hindering your senses, which causes you to misjudge. But if there is a hidden spell circle doing the same job, it limits the errors that could occur. Stanley explained. And as for your reward dash, I don't need one. Can you teach me how to do what you did? Because from what I know, it should be impossible to accomplish, but since I've witnessed it with my own eyes, I now know that it's possible. Shiro shook her head. I was planning to teach you this regardless. Are you sure you don't want a reward? Stanley titled his head. I'm sure. Plus, I've already received this rainbow grade item from you, so I'm satisfied. Shiro grinned, as Stanley sighed softly before nodding with a smile. I'll only show you the fundamentals today, since it's getting pretty late. We'll continue this tomorrow at the same time. Are you sure? Isn't it tiring to teach for the entire day? Shiro asked with slight concern since he was also teaching Aram, Sylvia, and Ian. Don't worry about your teacher. I can handle it. But, I must say, I was rather surprised to see that you have a sibling. Your father had never told me about her. Stanley patted Shiro's hair with a chuckle. Ozo, she's not my sibling. She's my daughter. Shiro corrected him. She's quite old to be your daughter, isn't she? When did you even have her? Stanley asked with confusion. She's a special case. I say she's my daughter, but that's because we are indeed related by blood. You see, before she was born, I made a blood contract with her while she was an egg. Ian is actually a phoenix, and she's not even a year old yet. Shiro explained as Stanley blinked to make sure he wasn't in an illusion before furrowing his brows. She's not even a year old yet. He asked. Yup, Shiro nodded. And to be fair, neither am I. Imagine a god who hasn't even been born for a year. Nimue laughed. Amen. Wouldn't that be interesting? Though I doubt I can become a god before my birthday. Shiro shook her head. You never know. Though if it did happen, poor Maddie is gonna cry. Nimue shrugged. True. Shiro smiled. Focusing back on her teacher, she saw that he was in deep thought before sighing. No wonder her mana felt different to normal people. It was because she's a phoenix. What about you then? Your mana is rather unique. Stanley asked as Shiro only shrugged. Things happened, and my class has changed. It's still magic-based, so you don't have to worry. Shiro replied as Stanley nodded his head. Anyways, let's begin our lessons on the fundamentals of this spell. #### for the next week. Shiro's training consisted of trying to achieve a similar technique as to Mio's absolute defense, and to do so, both Koji and Mio would attack Shiro simultaneously in the simulation from all angles to make sure that this worked properly. She was not allowed to use any skills or speed-enhancing tools. She had to clear it with her base stats only along with a single blade. In addition to this, she had to also improve on handling her weapon better so that it would not be as easily disarmed. Naturally, the training was harsh, especially since it was her parents training her. With the knowledge that this was the digital world, they didn't need to worry about truly harming Shiro. After a round of training with her parents, there was also Stanley's training in the mysterious mountains. Thankfully, due to her strong mental fortitude and the help of the passive from Rejuvenation EX, she was able to complete everything without too many problems. However, the same could not be said for the rest of the party, especially for Chunyu, as he always returned to Sylvia in a wounded state. While the party was taking a break from the first week of training, the teachers sat around a conference table to discuss their improvements. So how is Chunyu? I've seen his state, and it looks like you've done quite a number on him. Koji asked as Finn only laughed. What can I say? I like the kid. He's got potential and drive. Assassins die quickly if a mistake is made. I have to keep him near death and get him used to the feeling. That way, he knows when to leave if *T gets real. His girl is a healer, so she can help him if things get out of hand. Finn replied. Try not to let it get too out of hand. Koji shook his head. What about you, Lin? How are the girls on your side? They're fine. The girl called Lysandra has an abnormally high affinity for the light element, so her sword arts are highly aggressive, while Lyrica has adaptability. I can probably get them to frontline level by the end of the 3 weeks, since both girls are very talented. The only thing they will lack by the end of this training will be levels. Lin replied. Since you talk that much about them, you must like them quite a bit too, huh? Koji smiled as Lin preferred action over talking. Since she talked this much about the girls, it means that she had properly accepted them as her students. They're focused and they want to learn. They're eager, but know how to be patient. Lin replied before gesturing that she won't speak anymore. How about you, Chelsea? Before I say anything, can you tell me why the girl has a demon class? Chelsea frowned, as her family was killed by the demons when she was stuck in the demon continent. Special circumstances, but I can assure you that she's friendly. She better be. Chelsea narrowed her eyes. But setting that aside, how are they? Koji asked. They're good. Chelsea replied simply before closing her eyes, showing that she didn't want to speak more about this. Shaking his head, Koji looked towards Stanley. They're doing okay. Just let me do my thing, and I'll get them up to standard since they're willing to learn. Also, try not to tire out Shiro during your training, or else she won't be able to focus as well during mine. Stanley sighed. It's either that or you can stop your lessons and stop kidnapping my daughter to a mountain in God knows where. Koji retorted with a twitching smile. Does your mansion look like it can provide enough mana for me and her to practice with? The mountain is a holy land for mages. There's no way I'm going to give up the chance of letting Shiro receive the benefits of staying in such a mana-rich place. Stanley frowned. Seeing that the two were about to argue once more, Lin, Finn, and Chelsea decided to leave the room and let them argue it out. During the second week of training, Shiro started to show signs of achieving the lowest level of Mio's absolute defense. Even though she couldn't block everything, she could now find 1 or 2 gaps to counter during Mio and Koji's barrage of sword attacks. In addition to this, thanks to Koji's training, it was now harder to divest Shiro of her sword, and even if they did, she could summon a new one straight away. Rather than using all the copies of Athra straight away, she'll keep one just in case she's disarmed so that she could rearm herself quickly. As for the one that was knocked away, she would unsummon it so that she could act as a spare. That way, she could always make sure that there is a sword in her hand. There was a point that Mio brought up during their training which caused Shiro to wonder about the possibilities of her sword with her class, and that was, can she change the structure of Athra? Since her sword had the properties of element shift and she also had the nanotech attunement which was tier 6, there was the chance that she could convert her sword into a gun while maintaining the stats. This means that she could take people by surprise when the sword grows a barrel and shoots them in the face. With this knowledge, Shiro decided to do some late-night training so that she could make use of this. So far, the biggest success that she had was converting Athra into different forms of blades. There was still some difficulty with shifting the blade into a gun as it would shatter apart the moment she tried, but Shiro understood that the cause of failure was her control.as. For her magical training, Stanley was surprised when she revealed her crazy INT stat, but became a little annoyed when she couldn't make the most out of it. Watching her cast a few spells, he couldn't help but sigh when he saw the amount of strain that she was putting on her links with each cast. It was akin to thrusting a large chunk of tissue down a small pipe, and Nimue was the plumber who made sure it never got stuck. In other words, if not for Nimue, half of her casts would be impossible to pull off. Therefore, their training also consisted of making sure Shiro didn't explode her links once more by forcing mana through the links. Kuromi never had this problem as her mana and skills weren't as insane as Shiro's. The only reason that this is even a problem is due to the nature of Shiro's skills. They were percentile-based. If a spell takes 50% of her mana to cast, it means that she is thrusting a minimum of 700 million points worth of mana through her mana links. Hearing her teacher's evaluation of her situation, Shiro's smile twitched, as she was essentially playing a roulette of who could kill her the fastest. However, if it was just Nimue, she would still have trouble surviving the surge of mana, which is where her monster skill came in. Rejuvenation EX's passive put her in a constant state of incredible healing, which helps relieve the stress her links were feeling. In the end, despite her powerful output, Shiro was actually quite weak if one thinks in terms of efficiency. If she could study the correct casting techniques along with making sure she makes the most out of her 1.5 billion points of mana, then she could truly shine as an outstanding mage. After breaking this news to her party, they were speechless knowing that Shiro had so much room for improvement, both in magic and swords.as for her parents. Mio was overjoyed as this meant that Shiro could become much stronger. In the future, when the new age arrives, there was a higher chance Shiro could protect herself from danger. During these 2 weeks, Shiro had stopped herself from using the dagger since she wanted to see what she lacked after the training. That way, she could make the most out of it. For example, if she could not learn absolute domain completely, she could use the dagger to find a better defensive skill that suited her. Naturally, she was not the only one to have benefited from the training. Under Lin's guidance, Lysandra had developed a new sword style which takes advantage of her insane affinity with light magic. The new style was focused around versatility along with pure offensive power. Her light could either blind her enemies or increase her speed, which allows her to dance around her opponents while they struggle to hit her. With Diaresis of Isun, on the other hand, Lyrica developed a defensive stance since she is a highly adaptive fighter. She called the technique All Guard. It was a neutral stance which allowed her to adapt to the fight depending on her opponent's movements before switching to a more aggressive stance. It was perfect for when she doesn't know her opponent's skill set. Unfortunately, it wasn't as effective against large monsters, so Lin conducted a few extra sessions after the lessons had ended to help her in that regard. The result of which is a branch technique that was similar to how her Phantom Path worked. This branch technique was specifically designed for Lyrica to fight against larger opponents, and they decided to call it All Guard Form 2. Shinyu managed to improve his overall skill set, such as stealth and scouting. However, he managed to surprise everyone when he discovered an S-rank technique, which the system registered into his skill set, Reaper's Hand. You increase your understanding of the enemy's anatomy with every attack you land. Once you reach a certain point of understanding, your next attack will gain a 400% boost in attack and guarantee a critical strike, and ignores 90% of all forms of defense. Your understanding increases faster the longer you keep in contact with your enemy. Chunyu's acquisition of this skill caused Finn to suggest accepting Chunyu as his personal student and take him away for a longer period of time so that he can train him more. Unfortunately, since they were going to go to Mount Olympus in a week, Chunyu had to disagree, but Finn didn't mind. Instead, he was going to cramp as much as he could into this week. The expression that he had while saying this made Chunyu fear for his life, but Sylvia only gave him a loving smile, reassuring him that even if he dies, she can bring him back. The remaining party members received an overall boost to their skill set, but Helion and Madison seemed a little stuck. That was because Madison wasn't too good at being an offensive tank, while Helion's defense was lacking. This caused Chelsea some annoyance, but Koji wasn't worried. After all, she gave him her word that she'll bring them up to standard even if she has to pay a visit to Hades himself and get him to help. After that last meeting, Chelsea dragged them away to a different place to continue their training, and they haven't been seen since. With this being the final week of training, the teachers wanted to make sure they learned as much as they could, so the training was especially hard, but the party powered on. ###full. Breathing out roughly, Shiro was out of breath while laying on her back. Today was the final day of the 3 weeks training, and during this time, she had improved massively. At the start, she struggled to keep up with her parents, but now, she could counter and land a few hits back, which was apparently very impressive according to Stanley, since they had the level advantage which boosts up their perception.as for her magical training. She had finally fixed her issue with thrusting large amounts of mana through her veins, and the result was that she could now multicast large spells at the same time. This wasn't the same as the hundreds of small spells she could do, but rather 100 Wrath of Stars at once. The only problem with this is that she had to make sure she regulated her mana properly during this, or else all the magic circles would shatter and cancel itself out. Otherwise, she could finally be called a proper mage in Stanley's eyes. Are you going to use the dagger now? You've finished your parents' training, haven't you? Stanley asked as he was sitting down on a boulder with sweat dripping off his face. Amen. I just need to take a moment to get my breath back. Shiro replied with a soft chuckle. Looking at the orange sky that had tints of purple, Shiro had a small smile on her face since the short moments after training were quite relaxing. Cold winds brushed against her while the sea of mana drifted around them. After 3 weeks, we still haven't named this place yet, have we? Shiro reminded. Amen. What should it be called? Stanley asked, as this wasn't really a priority for him. All he knew about this place was that it was a perfect location for a mage's training. Why don't we call this place Astral Horizons? After all, the stars cause the clouds of mana to shimmer with a soft light at night. Shiro suggested with a grin. After resting for a little bit, Shiro decided to leave some nanobots in this location so that she could come back to this place whenever she wanted, but there was a slight problem about that thought. With the sheer amount of ambient mana around this place, the nanobots would go out of control if she wasn't here to regulate them every day. Who knows? The next time she comes back to this place, the nanobots might have already consumed the mountain. Teach, is there a way for me to come back to this place? It would be a waste to leave here forever. Shiro asked as Stanley nodded. If you want, I can make you a few teleport scrolls to this location. Stanley suggested. Wait, you can do that? Shiro asked with a raised eyebrow. Of course I can. I teleport all the time. It's only natural that I would have figured out how to make these scrolls somewhere down the line. Stanley shrugged as he brought out a few pieces of old parchment and started to enchant them with Tier 5 magic. Watching him make the teleport scrolls, Shiro made sure that she remembered everything that he was doing. After all, it would be handy if she could do it too. That way her friends could teleport to a specific location should they ever get lost or get stuck in a place. However, during this, Shiro noticed a strange magic circle within the enchantment. Teach, what's that magic circle? It's nothing like anything I've seen before, Shiro asked as it was filled with unfamiliar runes. Oh, it's something that can help you ignore spatial locks. They're the bane of teleportation users. I found this during one of my journeys, and apparently it was used by a demigod to avoid the cages set by gods. So far, it's been working quite nicely, and I haven't ran into any trouble when people lock the space around me. Stanley replied with a soft chuckle. Oh, do you think I can use it as well then? My Rift Strider is a form of teleport, I suppose. So the moment they lock the space, one of my main skills will be blocked. Shiro asked as Stanley nodded. Of course, everything should be recorded in this book. Reaching into his inventory, Stanley gave Shiro a delicate book with no title. Flipping through the pages with care, she made sure to remember everything. If you read through it, you should receive a system notification saying that you've discovered lost runes, and the option to use a new set of runes to create your magic circles should appear. You do. Shiro raised her eyebrows since her system didn't respond at all. That's strange. Perhaps it's a unique skill. Stanley frowned. It's fine. I'll think of new ways to achieve the same effect eventually. Shiro shrugged. After creating several teleportation scrolls for this place, Stanley handed them to Shiro. These should work even without the ignore spatial lock function, so if you study them in your spare time, you should be able to recreate them with ease. He smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Thank you. Shall we go back now? Today's the final day of training, isn't it? 3 weeks is such a short time. Stanley sighed as he wished he could stay with Shiro more so that he could teach her everything. He knew. Don't worry though. We'll probably come back for a little bit after the god trials. Shiro grinned as Stanley smiled. Let's head back now. Opening a portal, Stanley gestured for Shiro to walk through. Turning around to give Astral Horizons one last glance, Shiro stepped through the portal. After returning to the mansion, she saw that Halion and Madison hadn't returned yet and decided to take this time to use her dagger of divine insight, seeing as though it was just choosing one technique and that it shouldn't take too long. She told the party that she'll be right back. Walking to one of the training halls, she pulled the dagger out of her inventory and wondered how she should use the item. All it said was that the dagger will teleport the user into a divine space, which allows them to study the techniques used by the gods. Thinking about how she used most items, Shiro decided to inject her mana into the dagger. However, the moment she did this, she felt a tug on her consciousness and knew what was coming. Next, whoever makes these items really needs to stop knocking me out, she complained before collapsing on the ground. Looking at the myriad of doors with a neutral expression, Shiro sighed before glancing towards her system. You have discovered the divine sword space. Here you can study a myriad of sword skills. You have to first answer questions by stepping through the doors. Once you have answered all the questions, the right sword skills will appear for you to study. Reino, HM. Seems interesting, Shiro muttered. Walking up to the first set of doors, she saw a row of words light up in the sky. In a fight, do you take the initiative or wait for them to react? Looking to her left, she could see the door with the words initiative while the door on the right had the word reactive. Naturally, she was one to initiate the fight, so she immediately stepped through the initiative door. Just as she stepped through the door, she saw a dummy with a sword on the other side of the room as her system flickered once more. Defeat the dummy. Raising her eyebrows, Shiro summoned 2 copies of Athera into her hand and wrapped herself with lightning. Using the Takamikazuchi technique, her body flickered out of Sai and appeared before the dummy. Twisting her body, she swung towards his head. Asterisk clang. Surprised by the fact that her sword was blocked just in the nick of time, Shiro quickly calmed herself and remembered all her training with her parents. Using her spare sword to lock against the dummy's sword, she used this chance to push his guard down and kneed him in the face. Watching the dummy stumble back, she was about to continue when he stomped down and launched himself towards her. Narrowing her eyes, she raised her arm and parried his blade before flinging the sword out of his hand. Letting go of her spare sword, she grabbed him by the head and stabbed her sword upwards. With Athera firmly embedded into the dummy's head, Shiro watched as it crumbled to the ground and was turned to ash. That was easy, she muttered. However, her talk was cut short when another dummy appeared and instantly lashed out towards her. Quickly parrying his blade with the handle of her sword, Shiro pushed his sword away and cleaved down with Athera while he had no guard, cutting the dummy in two. Shiro clicked her tongue in annoyance. You said defeat the dummy, not dummies. It ain't F asterisk king plural, so why is there 2 of these F asterisk curs? Shiro complained as more doors appeared in front of her. Going through each of these doors wasn't too difficult with what she's learned over the course of the 3 weeks. If not for her parents' training, she might have had some difficulty as she realized that she could only use the basic elements and just her sword. Similar to what happened in Athera's first inner world, she was limited in the things that she could use. Cracking her neck, she destroyed another dummy and walked up to the next door. Do you wish to become the strongest swordswoman? Oh, the strongest swordswoman. Shiro raised her eyebrows as this was a rather interesting question. After all, she had never thought of becoming the best swordswoman, but rather the best in general. If she was the strongest in the world, she wouldn't have to give a crap about gods and the system taking away what she loved. Even though Kuromi was herself, she was still her older sister whom she treasured. If she was the strongest at the moment in time, she could stop the system from taking her away. Should she only be the strongest swordswoman, it limits the other options such as strongest mage and such. Call her greedy, but she wanted to be the best in everything. Just as she thought of this, a third door appeared in front of her. Raising her eyebrows, she read the text on the door and couldn't help but laugh. I want to be the best at everything. Shaking her head, she pushed this door open and stepped through without hesitation. Walking through the door, she found herself in the middle of the sea. There seemed to be an invisible barrier preventing her from falling down, as clear blue skies and white clouds could be seen above her. Standing in the middle of all this was a young man, wearing a few pieces of armor over his clothes. You are quite the greedy person, aren't you? The man asked with a complicated expression. He didn't expect the trial that he created to generate a third option for this girl. In all his time of being here and watching people use his item to get a sword skill, this phenomenon had never happened. What can I say? I'm a needy woman. Looking at the man, Shiro was rather surprised to see that he also had white hair and red eyes much like her. Care to give me your name? She asked with a chuckle. It's been quite a long time since anyone has asked me for my name. But I suppose you can just call me Sieg. Sieg smiled as he snapped his fingers. Two chairs appeared in the empty space. Sitting down on one of them, Sieg gestured for Shiro to sit down as well. Thank you. So care to tell me what kind of skill I'll get? Shiro asked while crossing her legs. What kind of skill do you want? Or rather, what kind of skill do you think will make you the strongest in the world? You don't want to be the strongest swordswoman, but rather the strongest in general. That means transcending your system as it currently governs everything that happens. Sieg replied, since you seem to be the owner of this place, why don't you tell me the best skill that you have? There is no best skill per se, only the best execution of a skill. While there is a large difference between low-level skills, high-level ones require the user to be good at using them. In that regard, every skill in the high levels is the best skill. You just need to know which one suits you more. Sieg shook his head. I understand that, hence why all the tests before this room. Therefore, I'm asking you which skill matches me the most. So despite wanting to be the best in the world, you want me to dictate what skill you get. Sieg raised his eyebrows as Shiro narrowed her eyes. Yup. After all, as someone who is most likely tier 8 or perhaps higher, you would know the best skill in terms of raw stats and hidden mechanics. Interesting. You have a set of beautiful eyes which wants to peer into everything. Sieg smiled. Thanks for the flattery, but I think we should cut the conversation short. I have places to be and things to do. Shiro waved her hand. Fine. I wanted to talk a little longer since it has been quite a while since I had last come into contact with anyone in a garden. But I understand. After all, you have such a huge burden weighing down on your shoulders. Sieg narrowed his eyes, waving his hand. Lights started to converge towards his location as they started to form a golden book. Flipping through the pages, he tore one out and pushed it towards Shiro. Reaching out for the page, Shiro watched as the page merged into her body. The moment her hand came into contact, I have given you what you desired. What you do with it is now no longer my concern. I suppose I should say good luck, young one. Even though you asked for my name, you shall forget about me the moment you leave this place. Sieg smiled as Shiro felt her vision blur. Once Shiro was gone from this space, a woman materialized next to Sieg and wrapped her arms around his neck. You sure you don't want to tell her more? I can sense that someone quite powerful has given the girl her support. And it isn't Nyx. The woman asked as Sieg shook his head. No, she'll find out sooner or later. The records state that she'll meet her soon. Sieg replied as the book in his hands faded away. ####, snapping her eyes open. Shiro saw that she was still in the training hall. Rubbing her head, Shiro furrowed her brows and frowned. **T, what was his name? He did say that I'll forget his name, but I didn't forget him. she muttered as the person who she was talking to seemed to know more than what he was letting on. With circumflex sighing softly, she decided to set it aside for now and check out the new skill that she got. Item Master. You can use any item to its maximum efficiency. This is only limited by your power and knowledge. Amen. Item Master. I thought he gave me a sword skill. This is just a miscellaneous skill. Shiro frowned, feeling ripped off that she had used a rainbow-grade item for this skill. However, there was something that caught her attention, and that was the 3 question marks. The last time she had seen this on a skill was extraction, and that was a broken skill that allowed her to steal others' skill along with taking their life away. Understanding that there must be more to this, Shiro decided to test it out and summoned her sword. Swinging her sword around for a moment, it didn't feel any different. Why are you just swinging your sword around? Nimue asked as she yawned. She had just had a short nap and woke up to Shiro swinging her sword randomly. I used the dagger that Teach gave me, but the skill I got from it was strange. It isn't a sword skill nor technique, even though the description clearly says that it would give me one. Shiro replied with a frown. *Maybe you're not doing it right. Show me the skill, and I'll have a look as well. Showing Nimue the description of her skill, Shiro waited for her reply. The F***CK? Are you sure this is what you got from the dagger? Nimue asked with disbelief. You see what I mean? Shiro sighed. Yeah, I do. What the hell? Do you feel any different with your sword? Nope. It feels normal like usual. Shiro shook her head. Maybe if you properly tried to attack something? Nimue suggested. Nodding her head, Shiro created a target and narrowed. Her eyes taking a deep breath, she was about to swing her sword when her mind became clear. It was like she understood every intricacy of her sword, its stress limit, what she could do without breaking it, and how to get the most power out of each attack. Shimmering with a golden light, her sword seemed as though it was enchanted by the very heavens itself. Seeing this, Nimue had a bad feeling well up in her heart. Wanting to call out to Shiro to make her stop, she was unfortunately too late. Sending out a wave of energy, all of the ambient mana in the room was instantly devoured by Athera, and the surrounding barriers shattered to pieces before Shiro could even shout, OSH*T. She watched as her blade of energy cleaved through the walls of the training hall and started to travel towards the rest of the mansion. Looking at the destruction in front of her with a twitching smile, she glanced back at her parents who rushed here on the first sign of danger. Looking at the trail of destruction that Shiro's attack had left behind, Koji couldn't help but want to cough up blood. After all, he had instructed people to set up the best barriers around each training hall so that they won't be destroyed, but Shiro had just shattered every single one of them. Even Stanley, when training with Aram, Ian, and Sylvia, didn't cause this, but his daughter did. What happened? He asked with a forced smile. I was testing a new skill, and well, I didn't realize that it would destroy the house. Shiro looked down with embarrassment and poked her fingers together. Wouldn't you know what your skill did? I'm pretty sure a skill will tell you how powerful it is. Koji asked once more. He could still see pieces of his mansion crumbling to the ground due to the lack of supports. Well, explaining her skill to her parents, they wondered about how powerful Shiro's sword must be for it to be able to destroy all of the barriers they had set. In order to repair everything, they might have to take quite a while, as the barriers were quite special. They needed components to make sure they keep working with only the occasional maintenance. It's fine. Don't blame her, darling. Honestly, how many times did you destroy our house when we were younger? Mio pouted as she hugged Shiro. Ignore your dad. He's just sad that the house is broken and that his room is destroyed. Mio waved her hand as Shiro nodded. If you want, I can use my nanobots to fix the house. Shiro offered since this was her fault. She didn't expect her attack to be so strong with the item master skill. Don't worry about it, darling. Let's just go have some food now. Yin's got a banquet ready for everyone. Thankfully, you didn't attack towards our direction, or else we'll have nothing to eat. Mio chuckled as she led Shiro out of the training hall and towards the dining hall. After eating dinner, the party rested up for the night and prepared to leave the city tomorrow. They were going to see if there were anyone in the Adventurers Guild with the teleport shrine to Mount Olympus. If not, they'll have to ride Shiro's jet again, and some of them aren't too keen about that.